Good afternoon. And today is going to be shoulder day. Now, normally I do weekends as core or ab day, but given that the last few videos I've had were more core workouts, I'm going to change the schedule and make shoulder just to vary things up a little bit. I'm obviously not in my gym clothes yet, and I'm drinking my pre-workout now, but that's neither here nor there. So we're going to train our shoulders, get some food, because tonight my roommate and I are going to be watching Lord of the Rings Return of the King Extended Edition.
So, you're so money and you don't even know it.
That's what I...
We watched the other two the weekend before. The weekend before we watched The Two Towers, and the weekend before that we watched Fellowship of the Ring. So we're just knocking them out each new weekend. And we already know Lord of the Rings holds up really well. They're some of the best movies ever made. So I'm excited to finish the trilogy off with the epic grand finale that is Return of the King.
Some good fucking food.
Next, we're going to actually probably read the books. Once I'm done with the books, I'm already reading through. But anyway, I'm excited for that, and I'm excited to train shoulders today because, like I said, I've been training, did so many ab videos lately that we need to change it up a little bit. On Monday, I'll train abs probably, just so that way I can make sure I still get that workout in. But anyways, let me drink my pre-workout, and I'll see you guys at the gym.
Since we're getting closer and closer to Halloween season, some people will say that we're already there. I want to talk about some of the pre-Halloween traditions I do to get myself hyped up for one of the best and most fun times of year. Obviously, the first thing I do is I actually start putting up some decorations. Not a lot at first, just a couple of those, plastic light-up pumpkins, which you'll see sometimes in the apartment hanging around. And I have a skeleton that just kind of chills there throughout the year. We kind of use him as an impromptu thing. His name's Hector, by the way. And I try to save my horror movie marathons for when October actually hits. What I like to do is I like to watch one horror movie a day. And I try to make it one that I haven't seen yet because there's already so many movies out there that I'm not really big on rewatching movies unless it's been a while since I've watched the movie, or if it's a movie I know I really love and I wouldn't mind popping it on again. But I like getting a fresh, new experience, even if it's not the best movie in the world. It'll be something I start watching during Halloween time. Like I said, once a day I'll watch a new horror film, or pre-season I'll normally put on, those pseudo found footage, people investigating abandoned buildings, things like that, or quote unquote haunted houses and things like that, even though I don't believe in ghosts. But I normally do that if I'm stretching, cleaning up, getting some studying done, things like that. And like I said, I normally will save the actual horror movie watching for the month of October. Now, keep in mind, I do watch horror movies throughout the entire year, but for my daily horror movie marathon, I save that for when October actually hits. And also during my downtime, I'll tend to listen to more horror stories, British ones specifically, because just the accent really helps sell those ghostly tales more so than the standard American accent would. That could be a bias of mine, but I really enjoy looking up and listening to British horror stories because I think they are really, really creepy. Even old made-for-TV British horror films were really good. But like I said, if I'm just trying to relax, just trying to put my head down for a little bit, I'll listen to an audiobook or a creepy horror story that I'll find on YouTube. And more often than not, it's going to be something I try and find that I haven't listened to before. Because like I said, I prefer having more fresh and newer experiences. And again, not all of them are going to be home runs. I am well aware of that before I even press play. But every now and again, you do find the diamond in the rough. And I think that's what I like to find the most, if I'm going to be honest.
So I'm doing kind of a sneakity-sneak video back from the fitness center, as you can see. And my roommate and I are about to run to Walmart to get some snacks for Lord of the Rings. as you do, because Lord of the Rings Return of the King is over 4 hours long, so we need to have our bellies full. Also going to get some sweetener for our coffee, and we shall see where the night takes us. But either way, let's get some food. Tendo.
So we made it to Walmart, and as you can see, I got to get my foot shot, and then I need to get my kombucha, so that way my stomach can properly break down that pizza you see there. Like I said, I got the sweetener, and that was way more expensive than I was anticipating. And these are healthy, right? Also, I found Maxine for a cheap price, but I actually wound up putting it back a little bit later because I found this, which seemed really awesome, so I wanted that instead. And I beat my roommate to checkout, so I had to wait. Isn't it cool to see how far Andy Serkis's career has gone? He went from playing such an innocent creature as Smeagol to playing the great force that is Renoir in Clair Obscur Expedition 33. I took this shot to show that it was sunny out earlier, and now it was dark. Long movie.
And this is the aftermath of two homeboys watching Lord of the Rings. Two completely empty pizzas. Heck yes. And it is now the next day, and look at my little walking, talking Halloween decoration. She says good morning as she's all snuggled up. So it is actually the next day because, as you all know, the Return of the King is insanely long. Like I said in the video, I showed that a little bit earlier in the video. You can see that it's still bright outside, and then I turn the camera and you can see right to the corner here that it was dark out. That's my N64, NES, and Super Nintendo collection, by the way. But that's neither here nor there. I wanted to talk about Lord of the Rings because, well, my roommate and I, we were watching through the entire series, Fellowship, Two Towers, and Return, all the extended versions. He has this is his box set, by the way, extended edition, all 3 movies on Blu-ray, and I wanted to watch the theatrical cuts because they were shorter, but he has the theatrical and extended cut box set also, but those were all in 4K, and my PS3 doesn't play 4K, obviously. I have a PS5, but this isn't even a 4K TV, so I don't know if it actually worked. Maybe it would. I never tried it. But again, that's neither here nor there. And I had my own Blu-ray box set, but I gave that to my dad as a gift, so after that I haven't been able to re-watch it because it wasn't on any streaming that at least I had. But I did have the theatrical version on DVD, so if I ever have an urge to watch the theatrical edition of Return of the King, that's what we are going to use, because we both agreed that if we ever want to do that type of marathon again, the extended versions are a little too long. At least the first 2 aren't that bad, but for the Return of the King being over 4 hours long, that is too long to try and do in a night. So we also wanted to do a thing where we do all 3 movies in just one sitting. We start at noon and get done at like 9 p.m. That'd have to be like an event where we get our friends over and we just have fun watching them. Now, a little bit earlier, I'm just going to bring this up randomly because I think it's just a fun little thing, but I talked about how I found a copy of Maxine for only about $7.50, and I put it back because I wanted to get the WNUF Halloween special double feature. But I couldn't find Maxine anywhere else cheaper, and I didn't want to miss out on it, so I grabbed it. I haven't seen it yet. In fact, I do have all 3 of the Ti West Maxine movies. This is the continuity order, but this is the release order. If you haven't noticed, I haven't watched a single one of these yet. I'm not sure if I'm going to do them in release order or if I'm going to do them in the continuity order. It doesn't matter that much, but just a little fun fact, because we got to talk about Lord of the Rings, my friends. And even before the films came out, Lord of the Rings was or is one of the most important pieces of fiction of all time. But I do think that the importance of the films is that it did bring Lord of the Rings to a new generation. I mean, before the movies were even announced, before they even came out, I know my mom and dad had copies of the books. And because I saw their box set, it was like one, I think it was like from the 80s, maybe. It had all 4 books, including The Hobbit. And when I was a little kid, they actually would read bedtime stories to me, and they read through at least The Hobbit and Return of the King. They read to me, but I don't think they read Fellowship or Two Towers. I don't remember. But my family is very, very, very big Lord of the Rings fans. My dad, he is so obsessed with Lord of the Rings. Like, I don't know if Jeremy Johns, he talked about how he says his favorite movie is Lord of the Rings. He's not saying which one, he just means the whole. That's exactly how my dad is. My dad is such a huge fan of Lord of the Rings. He still does Lord of the Rings movie nights. And I don't just mean he watches the movies. I mean, he gets his friends together, they dress up like the characters, and then they'll marathon all the movies. I don't know if they include The Hobbit with that. We didn't with our little pseudo-marathon. But The Hobbit is such a different thing. Well, it's not a different thing, but it's a different experience from the original trilogy of Lord of the Rings, because The Hobbit is supposed to be just one story, and then they extended it out into 3 full-length Lord of the Rings long films. Like, each film is as long as each individual actual Lord of the Rings movie. And I saw those movies and I did like them a lot, but there's the magic of the original trilogy that still holds up. And one thing that I still need to do is I still want to watch the animated movies, because it depends on you ask. Some people, a lot of people say they're not as good as the Peter Jackson trilogy, but it's still an important piece of history, because I can imagine that also brought Lord of the Rings to that generation too. Because they had the animated Hobbit, they had the animated Fellowship, Two Towers, and then they had Return of the King animated, but it was made by a different production company, so some people don't even count it as an actual sequel to the Two Towers. I don't know, I'd have to watch all of them to be like, okay, this works or it doesn't. I think I even read somewhere that the Return of the King takes more from Two Towers than it does actual Return of the King. But honestly, I don't know. Like I said, it was made by a different company. But without Lord of the Rings, think of all the stuff we wouldn't have either. Of course, we have to keep in mind, Lord of the Rings isn't the first fantasy. There's, Conan the Barbarian predates it with the sword and sorcery type of fantasy, or as some people call sword and sandals. I like to call it prehistoric fantasy. That era of fantasy where it's kind of looks like somewhat dinosaur primitive times. There's Conan the Barbarian, Barbarians, the Barbarian Brothers, those types of movies. Kroll the Conqueror, Solomon Kane, can't believe I forgot him. Obviously, or John Carter of Mars, or Princess of Mars, as the book is actually called. But as we know, these predate Lord of the Rings. At least I think Conan the Barbarian predates Lord of the Rings, at least by a little bit. And there was even an opera that I forget what the opera is called, but it's called The Ring of Something. And it's a very similar story to with the Great Ring of Power, but J.R.R. Tolkien said that the only connection that these two stories have is that the ring is round. So how much inspiration from that opera to Lord of the Rings there actually is, unfortunately we can't ask J.R.R. Tolkien, and as far as I know, he has no current living or like blood relatives, because his son died, and I don't know if his son had any kids. Don't quote me on that. But when it comes to the inspirations for Lord of the Rings, a lot of it came from him being a World War I veteran. And that shows that having true life experience and things really aids in crafting such exceptional stories. Because from what I heard, and this is a rumor, this might be true, apparently Lord of the Rings was going to be Bilbo on another venture to find more treasure, but he didn't want to just repeat the same story, so he rewrote it to be one of the, if not the greatest and most important piece of literature to exist. And we also have to keep in mind that we have J.R.R. Tolkien to thank for bringing C.S. Lewis to God. At least that's what I've heard. I wish I knew my history way more than I'm letting on, but from what I understand, J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis were obviously friends, and C.S. Lewis was an atheist. And then through friendship, J.R.R. Tolkien made C.S. Lewis Christian. And then we got another one of the greatest fantasy series of all time, The Chronicles of Narnia. And the one thing that they have in common is The Hobbit and The Chronicles of Narnia. They're definitely made more for kids. Lord of the Rings is a bit more serious in tone than The Hobbit is. So, I mean, obviously kids can read Lord of the Rings, because the thing about Lord of the Rings is that it's a story of hope, good triumphing over evil, because one person because there was a novel series, and they made a movie about it recently, Dune. Great books. I love those books. But apparently J.R.R. Tolkien didn't like them because he thought they were too nihilistic. J.R.R. Tolkien was an optimist. And that's why after watching Lord of the Rings, I just felt on top of the world, because you can just feel the hope in it. No matter how dark things got, it was always humanity and coming together with other beings like the elves, the dwarves, the ents, coming together and finally taking down the evil that was overrun in Middle Earth. I mean, sure, Morgoth isn't there anymore, but Sauron, sorry. I have to say this, why do you make their names sound so similar? But Sauron was still reigning over. But the story is about good triumphing over evil. It's why I can't really get into Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones isn't bad, but it is just kind of nihilistic. It is just kind of pessimistic. It is just mean. And that's the point of Game of Thrones. It's meant to show that the world isn't a fair place, especially around that time period. It was going to be cruel. But, you know, that type of storytelling is not for me, because, like, I'm more of an optimistic person. I mean, I'm wearing a shirt that says, be still and know that I am God. I can't believe my brain farted for a second. I'm sorry. But, I mean, this shirt is more about shutting up and letting God and listening to what God has to say, especially when you're in a dour moment. And with Lord of the Rings, well, it's obviously not that completely. You definitely get a sense of Tolkien's passion for his faith. I mean, for crying out loud, Gandalf dies and then comes back after beating a giant demon, even though he just stole other EXP and then he's the one who got his evolution. But I'm kidding. So you can even find the little ties. I mean, Morgoth was essentially their fallen angel, and then Sauron was just one of his followers. So there is a lot of biblical hints in there. It's a little more subtle than in Narnia, because Narnia is really on the nose about it, which is fine. Narnia is great. Narnia does it very well, keep in mind. I mean, when it comes to Chronicles of Narnia, those books were also books my parents read to me as bedtime stories. And, you know, you have the story of Aslan and The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And we also watched the made-for-TV miniseries of the Chronicles of Narnia, which are actually very charming and very fun to watch if you need something to check out. But without a doubt, Lord of the Rings is the most important piece of fiction I think there's ever been experienced. Because I remember watching Lord of the Rings as a kid, and just the energy that came out of watching that movie, seeing my dad get excited, seeing just the Battle of Helm's Deep, going to Rivendell, that's the first movie, but the Battle at Minas Tirith for Frodo, all of that stuff. Even though I do need to ask a question: what happened to their horses? I don't remember if it's in theatrical cut, because in the theatrical cut, in the extended cut of Return of the King, he fights and destroys the mouth of Sauron, and they're on horseback when they do that. Then all of a sudden, there's no more horses. I don't know what happened to them, but plot holes happen. And I made a joke earlier. It's kind of funny to see Andy Serkis go from such a small role in Lord of the Rings to playing Renoir in Clair Obscur Expedition 33. This is, in my opinion, at least for me, the modern Lord of the Rings. It's one of the best told stories I have experienced in fiction in such a long time. Clair Obscur and Lord of the Rings are such spectacular stories that I want people to experience them both. I mean, the time of Lord of the Rings will probably distract a lot of people, and people nowadays don't really like reading. And I don't know how people would feel about the animated movies. I don't know if those hold up. Because like I said, I haven't seen them. Whereas I will happily say any day of the week, Lord of the Rings movies, live action, hold up so well that you'd think they were made yesterday. Some special effects notwithstanding, because you can tell now, especially when they're in HD, you can see, oh, okay, I see what's going on there. Which is why sometimes some things are better left looking a little grimy and not so cleaned up. But it's still Lord of the Rings, and it's still fantastic. But with Clair Obscur Expedition 33, this feels like the next follow-up to Lord of the Rings in terms of how great this story is and how much this brought people together. People still talk about Lord of the Rings to this day. People are still talking about Clair Obscur now. Obviously, the legacy of Clair Obscur is going to have to come from years down the line. Will it still have that legacy going on then? We shall see. But as of now, to me, this is up there with Lord of the Rings. This is up there with Chronicles of Narnia. This is on the Fantasy Wall of Fame. Lord of the Rings, Chronicles of Narnia, Clair Obscur. There's a bunch of other stuff we can add up there too, but the three off the top of my head, this is the perfect follow-up. Obviously not story-wise, or not like plot, because the plot's not the same. In terms of exceptional fantasy. And while we were watching Lord of the Rings, I was also playing through Final Fantasy 16 because, like I said a little bit earlier in another video, I'm playing through all of the games that Ben Starr had a leading role in, and he voices Clive in Final Fantasy 16. And while I was watching Lord of the Rings, it made me really want to continue playing because I just wanted to experience more fantasy. I just wanted to keep going, And then it made me tell my roommate, oh, we need to watch Conan the Barbarian because Conan the Barbarian is awesome. It made me want to go put on Greedfall. It's a different type of fantasy, but still fantasy. And that's the thing about that movie series, is it makes me want to experience more of that genre. Well, like good versions of that genre. There are some misses out there, of course, but the impact that those movies have, especially nowadays, I think when we talk about the real world, which I'm not going to get too into, but with how kind of dour some things have been seeming lately, Lord of the Rings was that lights for 12 hours. Crying out loud. When we watched the Two Towers last week, it was on a Sunday, I literally said to him, hey, if we didn't have to get up at 5 in the morning tomorrow, I just say, screw it, we'll just put in Return of the King immediately after this and then watch it all the way through. 4 hours and all. We wouldn't have been done that movie until, we wouldn't have been done the Two Towers until around 8:30 p.m., but screw it, it's Return of the King. It's awesome. We will power through it and we will enjoy it. And we loved Return of the King. I already loved Return of the King. He hasn't seen the extended cut until last night, by the way. So that was a great experience for him. And also, when it comes to some extended lore of Lord of the Rings, there's Shadow of Mordor. And this, I'm going to have to bring up that I don't think J.R.R. Tolkien would have liked this that much, because it is very violent and it has a lot of cursing. If you watch Lord of the Rings, there's no swearing in it. There is that one time in the extended cut where Gimli is saying something in his language that might be a curse word, but no one blatantly says anything awful. Most, people will call people fools and things like that, but you have no F-bombs, you have no A-bombs, you have no S-words, nothing like that. It's very clean because Lord of the Rings was made for a younger audience, at least the books were. That's why when I saw Battle of the Five Armies and I heard someone say bastard, that freaked my brain out, because I'm thinking no one curses in this series at all, and then all of a sudden someone is. And with Shadow of Mordor, there's a lot of cursing in that. I haven't played Shadow of War yet, but still a good game. I will say that. The game is still great. And my roommate was telling me he played Lord of the Rings: The Third Age, which is actually more like Final Fantasy X in a Lord of the Rings setting. And that's actually pretty cool because I love turn-based combat. If they did a re-release of that, they don't have to do a full HD thing. They can just plop it onto the PlayStation Store. I'd buy that day one, honestly, because I would love to play through that. That looks like a lot of fun. But you have, obviously, the books, and then there's, I wish they had Tom Bombadil in the movies, because Tom Bombadil is awesome. Yeah, he's just a supporting character, but there's just something charming about him. Unfortunately, Peter Jackson said he couldn't find a way to actually fit him into this story, but it is still disappointing that he wasn't in it after, experiencing the books and then him just not being featured. And by experiencing the books, I really want to just genuinely read through them now. Because like I said, I remember The Hobbit and Return of the King being read to me when I was a little kid. But I want to experience them for myself now, from start to finish. And I actually went to a used bookstore today to grab all of them, but they only had Fellowship of the Ring. And I didn't want, and here's the thing, here's why I want to get them all at once. Because I want it to be, I read the one and immediately can jump into the other, read the one and the other, and then the other, right after the other. Similar to how we did with the Lord of the Rings trilogy here. It was one after another. I mean, obviously all not on the same day, but we experienced Fellowship, Two Towers, Return. And it was awesome. Probably one of the best ways to experience Return of the King, Lord of the Rings. However, I do want to see, they have Lord of the Rings live, and what they do is, my friends from church saw this. They play the movie, but they have a live orchestra. That would be outstanding to see. I would love to see them do all three, but I can't blame them if it's just like one movie and then that's it. Because the movies are so long, and expecting an entire band to do that for 12 hours. Here's the thing, I would pay top dollar for that. I'd pay like $200 for that. Obviously, I wouldn't do that a lot. It'd have to be a one-time thing. But either way, just imagine that experience. Because last year, my roommate and I, we were going to go see the Sonic Symphony. And unfortunately, they canceled it in our area, which really sucks because we were really looking forward to that, because it was going to be a couple weeks before the Sonic the Hedgehog 3 came out, and we thought that'd be a great build up for it. But again, they canceled it. They never said why, they just kind of did. But that's neither here nor there. Lord of the Rings. Like, obviously my favorite book is Starship Troopers. Starship Troopers is one of my favorite things, period. But then I remember Lord of the Rings. And how it just brings such great joy, just even thinking about it. Because while I was out at the gym doing my shoulder workout, I was listening to Edge of Night to get prepped for our watching of Return of the King. It was a cover of it, obviously, but how many movies or stories can you just remember characters without even thinking about it? How many scores can you remember without even thinking about it? And how many movies have come out lately that have the same impact that did? I mean, of course, we've had the Avengers movies. Those were great. And for me, personally, it'd probably be something along the lines of Pacific Rim. That'd be kind of my thing because I love giant monsters, giant robots. That, Shin Godzilla, Godzilla Minus One. Those great, exceptional movies, but movies that really did bring people together. That's what Lord of the Rings can do. That's what Lord of the Rings did. People to this day are still talking about Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is awesome, isn't it? Shoot, I can talk about Lord of the Rings for hours. If this was actually a topic of me discussing each of the films individually and then going into plot details and things like that, this video will be like probably longer than the entire trilogy combined. And I don't think my camera can handle that much data at once. But that's neither here nor there. Anyway, I'm not thinking about Lord of the Rings. I'm not thinking about fantasy. But it's getting late. I'm just going to chill now. Probably do some editing, though. Anyways, if you have not seen Lord of the Rings, please see Lord of the Rings. Do the theatrical cuts first, honestly. So that way you have better time management. And then, especially with Return of the King, because there's one plot detail that is in the theatrical cut that actually does change how the movie is perceived in the extended cut. One's suspense, one's reveal. You'll see what I mean if you watch them both. Obviously, if you want to watch both the theatrical cut and then immediately the extended cut back to back, go for it. God bless you, but make sure you have your day open for that. Anyways, I gotta call it a night. I'll catch you guys later. Peace. So, quick update. I actually found my extended edition box set. Cool.